Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. We are in our second year as a major league team with the expansion Wings, and it's been a pretty rough season so far. 27 and 43 record, 22 games behind. We've had a pretty mediocre pitching staff, which is slightly improved from a year ago. But after bringing on Shohei Ohtani, Shane Bieber, and Andrew Painter, we're expecting the pitching, particularly the starting, to be somewhat better than it has been so far. And we've got the worst offense in the National League, without a doubt. So that has not helped either. So the 27 and 43 record has been disappointing. We are at draft day for the first year player draft. We'll be getting into that shortly. But in an effort to improve our offense, we are going to make a couple of moves. We are going to actually send down last year's National League Rookie of the Year, Loydell Chappelle, hitting just 219 this year with 3 homers and 233 at-bats. His batting profile is the weakest among any of our outfielders. Maybe he can get himself straightened out in AAA. And that's going to allow us to bring up Vance Honeycutt, who is having a monster year in AAA, hitting 332 with 23 homers and 274 at-bats. We've been getting him more versatile in terms of the positions he can play. He's the number 60 prospect in baseball. He's a guy who's really developed well for us out of UNC. We picked him in the 8th round 3 years ago. And I think it's time to see what Honeycutt can do at the major league level, and if he can give this offense a boost. So we're going to ensure that he is out there playing for us every day. And one other move that we're going to make, and this one may be a little controversial based on the timing, not that we're going to send down Khalil Watson, brought him on to be a utility infielder, like the glove, but he's hitting just a $181 and 94 at-bats, not playing regularly. We'll get him some regular playing time down in AAA, see if we can upgrade the bat by bringing up last year's number 1 overall pick, Deshaun Seifu, number 38 prospect in baseball. He has not lit it up in AAA. He's hitting 237 in 278 at-bats, 11 doubles, 3 triples, 3 home runs. His OPS is only 671, so his OPS plus and his WRC plus well below average. But when I look at our coaching staff at the major league level, and I look at our hitting coach, Joey DeMonte, who's legendary at teaching hitting, outstanding with development, and excellent with mechanics, and he's expected to have an excellent relationship with Deshaun Seifu. And then I look at our bench coach, Luis Martinez, who's outstanding with development and good with mechanics, and he's also expected to have an excellent relationship with Seifu. Although Seifu, you can argue by, actually you can't even argue, you can just state based on how he's performed in AAA that he's probably not quite ready for the majors, but his gap power is already off the charts. His speed is off the charts. His home run power is what it is at this point, and hopefully he can still continue to refine that contact, avoiding strikeouts in the eye a little bit with the great coaching he's going to get at the major league level. Don't feel like he's going to hit any worse than Watson was, so I'm not sure exactly what position he's going to end up playing. Probably will be second base, likely against righties, and maybe third base against lefties. But we're going to ensure that Seifu gets some at-bats every day. I don't think either of these moves can make our offense worse. The other guy that we're going to look to get up in the not-so-distant future is Nick York. Hit well for us last year at the major leagues, is hitting very well in AAA this year. Just kind of got caught up in a numbers game. but we have added a couple of players to the trade block, notably shortstop Tommy Edman, who is going to be a free agent after this season, as well as catcher Christian Vasquez, who's going to be a free agent after this season as well. Don't know how much interest there will be in those players, but the guys in their 30s that don't bring much in terms of the bat, and we're probably not going to have back next year with this 27-43 record. If we can get anything interesting for them, we will certainly be entertaining offers. And I have tweaked the projected lineups from our bench coach Martinez a bit, but I think it says it all that with Seifu and Honeycutt, the two guys that we just brought up from AAA, Seifu is going to be our leadoff hitter against both righties and lefties. Honeycutt going to bat second against righties and third against lefties. So hopefully those two guys can help jumpstart this offense a bit over the next month and a half. But before we can see what those two can do as we try to turn this season around, it's time to dig in deep and figure out where we're going to go in the 2027 first-year player draft. And as you saw several episodes, and I've mentioned subsequently, we got very lucky moving up to the second pick in the lottery that was held back at the winter meetings. I think we were 7th or 9th, and we moved all the way up to second. So that was a big improvement and should allow us to obviously pick anyone except one player who's going to be available in the draft this year. Taking a look at a few players, Jason Cleghorn, 1975, suggested that he would go with the best offensive player among college hitters, and I think that's generally a pretty good strategy. I don't think it's what I'm going to do this year, but still we'll take a look at the top three, in my view, college bats who are available. Tatum Marsh is a college bat. He's certainly one to consider. I don't think we're going to go down that path, but certainly the potential home run power there is pretty intriguing. Mediocre speed, kind of mediocre-ish, maybe a little bit above average defensively, but certainly not a horrible bat. So he's an interesting prospect. Actually going to look at four guys. Derek Bentley, shortstop prospect out of Virginia Tech. My big concern with him is the personality, the low leadership, and the low work ethic. Does have decent potential in the field and decent potential with his bat, like the durability, facing great competition. But I don't think I'm going to go there. Jorge Aragui, another college player who's kind of interesting, another guy who's durable, okay defensively, but potentially a pretty interesting bat, and a bat that's not that far off being ready for the major leagues coming out of Bradley. And then last but not least, Joey Moore, another outfielder, corner outfielder type, excellent speed. He's got, quite honestly, a similar-ish batting profile to Seifu, who we went with number 1 overall last year, where his contact and his gap power are both a lot better than his home run power likely ever will be. Not as good and versatile defensively as Seifu, but very similar speed. Coming out of Dallas Baptist University. Don't think that we're going to go with any of those four guys, but I think those were the four most interesting college prospects, at least to me. The three most interesting high school hitting prospects: shortstop Joe Edwards, our scout views as a 5-star prospect. Not that great defensively, not that great on the base paths, but the home run power and then especially the eye, both could be excellent to exceptional, particularly with his ability to draw walks. So that's clearly a useful skill, but contact, gap power, and avoiding strikeouts are all at best going to be average-ish. I don't think that's a direction that we will go. Kurt Figueroa, probably the most well-balanced bat available in this draft. Going to turn 18 years old in a few days. He's a durable first baseman, brings nothing defensively, brings nothing as far as his speed. Don't love the low work ethic, but certainly if he's fortunate enough for that bat to completely develop, he's above average to excellent in every category, and his contact and his home run power are his two most attractive traits. So he is an interesting prospect as well. But if we're going to go with a high school bat, I think I'm leaning towards the shortstop, Roman Maples. Almost 19 years old, so a little older for the product of Brooklyn. He's made a commitment to Liberty University. Everything in his bat potentially could be average or better than average, with his contact and his gap power potentially borderline special. He's got enough speed to take a little bit of advantage of that good gap power. But most importantly, he's got a pretty good glove. 70 range, 60 error, 60 arm, and 55 turning double plays. So a guy who could be a plus bat, who's a potentially really nice fielder, not a gold glove shortstop by any stretch of the imagination. I think he could be a gold glove third baseman, and I think he could be, with that range in particular, an above average second baseman or shortstop defensively. So the combination of really good defense with a bat that could be better than average is pretty attractive to me. Now, when we look at the OSA draft, the Blue Jays are projected to take Maples number 1, so he could be the one guy that's not around for us. And we can see here we were number 7. I knew it was 7 or 9, so we moved up to number 2 from number 7. And Maples is projected to go first overall, but who knows what will actually happen there. And that brings us to the high school pitchers, who are probably the most volatile potential asset imaginable in OOTP drafting and scouting and development. They tempt you with their potential extremely high ceilings, and then they tend to frustrate you over time with their very low floors. I get it. But I feel like this might be a year where we do go with a high school pitcher at number 2 overall. In the comments from our last episode, Bald Sherlock kind of made the same point. My words, not his, but kind of I think his view was that this might be a draft, since it doesn't seem like there's a slam dunk number 1 guy that you hold your nose and you go with a high school pitcher with really high potential and hope that you get lucky and develop him effectively. And to me, the 3 most interesting high school pitchers are Walt Becerra, 18 years old, coming out of high school in Texas. Like the high work ethic, potential 4-pitch arsenal, but still will have 3 pitches even if that changeup doesn't develop. Really good stamina, exceptional at holding runners on, so could potentially have well above average stuff movement and control if he completely develops. Don't love that he's barely throwing 90 miles an hour at the age of 18 years old, but with that work ethic, think he's a relatively clean prospect, but obviously has a long way to go to completely develop. Ben Kramer, another 18-year-old, but he's close to 19, going to turn 19 in 9 days. Like the durability, He's a ground ball focused pitcher who's already throwing in the low to mid 90s, potentially off the charts movement. He's going to be a 3-pitch guy. That changeup we don't think is ever going to be worth anything. But the positive thing is that his fastball and his sinker are almost major league quality already, according to our scout. So if those pitches continue to develop, should have plus stuff with exceptional movement and above average control. Looks like he could be another guy with a high ceiling if he completely develops. And then last but not least, Ali Ostendorf. Another guy, we love the durability as far as his injury proneness. Love the high work ethic and leadership. High work ethic and intelligence. Don't love the low leadership. Stamina and hold runners are fine. Potential 5-pitch arsenal, even if the changeup doesn't develop, a potential 4-pitch arsenal. His splitter and his cutter aren't that far off major league quality at this point, and we think both the knuckle curve and the curve could potentially be exceptional pitches for him. So there's potential there for him to have really good stuff, really good movement, and slightly above average control. 18 years old, throwing in the low 90s at this point. Committed to Duke. Don't love that he's 5'10", 175 pounds, although that's pretty average, I guess, in the context of adult males for a right-handed major league starting pitcher. He's definitely on the small side, but he is certainly an intriguing prospect as well. So Becerra, Kramer, and Ostendorf, in my view, are the 3 most interesting high school pitching prospects if we decide to go down that path after we find out who's drafted number 1 overall. And it's time to get things underway. Find out who the Blue Jays are going to pick number 1 overall. So they went with the center fielder Tatum Marsh, the college player. Certainly liked the home run power that he had. As I mentioned, I didn't think he was going to be the direction that we would go. So now we've basically got an opportunity to pick anyone we want, whether it's a high school pitcher, a high school batter, or one of those other college players that we mentioned. I'm going to try to kind of pare it down to one of each and then decide which direction to go. And among the high school hitters, it's pretty easy choice for me as to which one of the 3 makes the final cut. Joe Edwards, solid shortstop prospect, but when I compare Joe Edwards to Roman Maples, prefer the glove with Maples, and the bat looks like it can be pretty well-rounded. So if I'm going to go shortstop with a high schooler, it's going to be Maples. And then comparing Maples to Kurt Figueroa, as I said, I think Figueroa's bat is the most well-rounded bat available in this draft. But that work ethic is a big turnoff to me. And then the horrible defensive skills, the lack of speed and bunting availability, can't even play him in a corner outfield spot, just makes it somewhat less interesting to me. So if we're going to go with a high school player, it's going to be with the shortstop Roman Maples, who looks like he could have, as we talked about earlier, an above-average bat, an above-average glove, versatility to play just about anywhere in the infield. So Maples is definitely in the mix. Turning to the college players, Derek Bentley, shortstop, not as good defensively as Maples, not as much speed. Obviously an incredibly versatile defensive player who can also pretty much play anywhere in the outfield. The bat is potentially interesting. Just don't love the low leadership and low work ethic combination. Now, I think it is less of a concern with a college player who is more developed like Bentley is. He's not that far off being major leaguer in terms of his contact and his gap power at the very least. But he still has significant needs to develop in terms of his home run power, his eye, and his avoid strikeouts. And I do worry that with the lack of work ethic, he may not develop to his full ceiling. So I think if we're going to go shortstop, I will go with Maples. So that lets me throw Bentley out, which leaves me with a couple of corner outfielders to pick from. Jorge Eragui, durable outfielder out of Bradley, potentially above average contact and home run power, exceptional gap power that he's not going to really take much advantage of with the lack of speed. And then the other guy for us to consider is Joey Moore, left fielder. Talked about him in his batting profile is somewhat similar, as I said, to what we picked up number 1 overall with Seifu last year. In a perfect world, I agree with commenters that all else being equal, I'd rather have a guy with more home run power than more contact if everything else about these guys was equal. But Seifu was the guy I ended up being drawn to last year. But because Moore is kind of a Seifu proxy, I think I avoid him. And that means if we're going to go with a college player, it's going to be Eragui, with the hope that that contact and home run power fully develop and he becomes a interesting corner outfielder. So Eragui and Maples are our final 2 position players in the mix. And then we turn to the pitchers. In turning to the starting pitchers, I will look at 2 other guys that I moved on from before the episode, but we'll at least touch on them. Dralix in the comments for our last episode mentioned Dave Krill, who is a really interesting prospect. A little older, almost 19 years old, but he's durable, high work ethic. He's got 4 pitches right now that are close to major league quality, which is pretty rare for a high schooler. The only reason he didn't make our final 3 was just our scout does not think that control is ever going to even be close to major league average. And given that the other 3 prospects that I prefer more all look like they're average or better in every aspect of the game, decided to pass on the Gray Ghost. And then Amari Mohead, starting pitching prospect out of Canada, has a potential 5 to 6 pitch arsenal. Competition level that he's faced up in Canada has been poor. He throws pretty hard, but he's another guy who's a little older, almost 19 years old also. If he had high work ethic, high intelligence, high leadership, some of those 3 traits that I care more about than loyalty, adaptability, and greed, might tend to move him up the list a little bit. Does have 3 pitches that are close to major league ready. He was a closer call for me than Krill because it was pretty easy for me to move on from Krill with the lack of control that he has, but ended up moving on from Mohead. So that leaves us with Becerra, Kramer, and Ostendorf as our potential selections if we go with a pitcher. And starting off with Kramer, only going to have 3 pitches, but that's still enough to be an effective starter. Like the durability. His stuff and his control could both be above average. His movement could be exceptional. With that exceptional movement, ground ball tendencies, already throwing in the low to mid 90s. Another guy who's probably not going to give up a ton of home runs and potentially pitch a lot of innings. So he's really interesting. Another guy who's a little older, as we talked about earlier, almost 19 years old. When I compare him to Walt Becerra, I like the work ethic on Becerra. Becerra is another guy who very well is only going to have 3 pitches. You hold out some hope that the changeup will develop. Like the stamina and holding runners ratings. Looks like he can be well above average in stuff, movement, and control. He's a lefty. My big concern with him is he just does not throw all that hard. He's a finesse pitcher, so he doesn't need to. He's got great movement. He knows what he's going to do with those 3 or 4 pitches that he's going to have. And then that brings us to Ali Ostendorf, who I like the most in some ways and I like the least in some ways. I don't love that he's small, but I like the durability, like the high work ethic and intelligence, like the fact that there is a potential 5-pitch arsenal and almost certainly a 4-pitch arsenal if everything works out. The splitter and the cutter aren't that far off major league quality, and the stuff and the movement look like they could both be exceptional and the control above average. I would prefer to not have the low leadership. I'd prefer that he be a little bigger and a little stronger, but he is allegedly pretty durable. So I think if I was going to go with Becerra, Kramer, or Ostendorf, I'm going to go with the small righty, Ali Ostendorf, who's committed to Duke, if I go with a pitcher. So to me, it comes down to the pitching prospect, the high schooler, Ali Ostendorf, looking for about $10 million, but we've got the money to potentially sign him. Really like the work ethic and intelligence. Think he could potentially be a front-end starter for us for many years to come, as long as the knuckle curve, the curve, or the changeup develop. Really only needs 1 of those pitches. If he gets 2 of those, he's probably a really good number 2 starter. And if all 3 of those develop, could definitely be a number 1 guy at the top of the rotation. So to me, it comes down to the high schooler Ostendorf among the pitchers. And then among the batters, as we've talked about, there's the college hitter Aragui, or there's the high school shortstop Maples. If I'm going to go with a position player, I'm going to go with the high school shortstop Maples. Really love the glove, really love the speed, and I think the bat could be above average. So he is a interestingest prospect. You look at this profile, batting-wise, you can almost say it's a Jeter-esque batting profile. And I know that at least one of you who's watching is going to be triggered by the fact that I'm talking about Jeter, particularly if I say with that 70 excellent range, that reminds me of Jeter as well, since 3/4 Badger likes to regularly disparage Jeter, and particularly his defensive ability. But as a Yankees fan, trying to make the comp to Jeter with Roman Naples certainly attracts me to him. I do think, you could argue that if he completely develops, that's a somewhat Jeter-esque batting profile. Speed probably not quite as good as Jeter's. Glove potentially maybe a little better than Jeter's. I really like Roman Maples, and the fact that he didn't go number 1 overall, as the mock draft indicated, or expected he would, does leave me with an interesting decision. And I know I am, to some degree, breaking a cardinal rule here, but when I look at the top prospects in our system, third, center, right, first, left, center, catcher, center field, left field, have to go down to a guy who's not even in the top 200, Ethan Robinson, who we picked in the 5th round back in our first draft in 2023, who looks like best case scenario, he's a 5 starter or a bullpen guy to get to the top pitching prospect in our system. Obviously, no clue what an Ostendorf is going to look like 3, 4, 5 years down the line. But there's also no real guarantee what a high school shortstop like Roman Maples is going to look like 3, 4, 5 years around the line or down the line. And I do feel, and those of you who have watched previous playthroughs of mine know that I like to try to build around pitching. And I feel like with Ostendorf, we've got a potential frontline starter who's available. He's got the high work ethic and intelligence. I don't love the low leadership, but I think, the work ethic and intelligence should at least offset that. He's a durable guy. He's already got 2 pitches at 18 years old that are getting close to major league quality. He's got potential for some other pitches to develop and could have a really nice profile when all is said and done. So we are going to go with the high school starting pitcher, Ali Ostendorf, here with the number 2 overall selection in the 2027 draft. And we'll find out what, if anyone that we've talked about is still around when we're picking in the second round. I would doubt it, but you never know. As far as the pitchers, 2 relievers that we talked about in the last episode who we weren't going to be drafting number 2 overall that do have 5-star potential are still available. Turning to the batters, Joe Edwards, who we talked about, still available. Not necessarily a horrible guy to think about for the second round. Our scout thinks he's a 5-star prospect. The glove is nothing special, but an exceptional ability to draw walks with potentially well above average home run power. If he is able to develop so that contact, gap power, and avoid strikeouts are average-ish, he could be a pretty interesting player. Before we make the second round decision, though, let's just check in on where the rest of the guys went. If I could click properly. And looking at some of the guys that we talked about, Figueroa went 5th overall to the Cubs. Aragui went 7th to the Expos. Maples, the young shortstop, went 8th to the Royals. And then they picked the college outfielder Joey Moore 9th. Derek Bentley, the shortstop, went 14th to the other expansion team in Nashville. Dave Krill, the starter, went 19th to Pittsburgh. Started a bit of a run of starters. Becerra lasted to 25th overall to the Cardinals. Amari Moorhead went 32nd to the Braves. Starting pitcher Kramer went 35th to the Astros. I think those are most of the guys that we talked about. So definitely have a decision to make here now. We'll go and we'll see what our scouting director recommends. You notice I didn't look at him for the first pick in the draft. I wanted to make the decision on my own. He's recommending Joe Edwards. Clearly, he's the only 5-star prospect left who's not a relief pitcher, so not a surprise, I suppose, to see our scout recommending him. We're going to do a little more digging before we make that decision. But as I just talked about, I think for a second-round pick, I think Edwards is certainly intriguing. He's probably more of a corner outfielder or a first baseman when all is said and done. The question with him is how he's going to develop. If that contact, gap power, and avoid strikeouts can get up to average-ish range, the exceptional eye and the well above average home run power are a pretty attractive combination. He's never going to be a major league shortstop, but could be an interesting bat for a first baseman or a corner outfielder, and a guy who, could play occasionally at second or third base if you really needed to because of injuries. And I think Edwards is going to be the selection, so going to go with what the scouting director recommends. The top pitchers available were all relievers. Did not see any starters who I wanted to pick in the second round. Maybe there will be some interesting relievers left in the third, fourth, fifth round for us to take a shot at. I did look at the catcher, Juan Laguna, given that with our recent trade of Andres Medina, we're looking for some talent at the catcher position for our minor league system and potentially the future. The ability, and particularly the arm, were not exciting to me. The bat certainly looks interesting, but between the fragility and the belief that best case scenario, he's an average-ish defensive catcher, he didn't move the needle for me. Joe Wiedenhoft, shortstop prospect, like the high work ethic, like that he's a little bit better as a potential shortstop. But if he fully develops, he's an above average hitter, but he's not really potentially exceptional at anything. So I think I am going to still go with Edwards. That potential off the chart ability to draw walks and the potential for some well above average home run power are attractive to me. I think he's pretty good value for a second round pick. So we are going to go ahead and offer him his slot amount and see what's available in the third round. And Wiedenhoft is actually still around. He could be a interesting guy to grab in the third round. I'm going to spend a little more time looking, but also see what our scouting director recommends. He recommends Brad Rapaski, who's a guy that was available last round also. Did like the work ethic, don't like the speed. He's a corner outfielder with a potentially decent bat. So there's certainly value there. Jesus Bocanegra, 17-year-old catcher. Slightly above average defensively, bit above average arm. The bat looks marginally interesting. If he had some leadership and work ethic, he'd be a little more interesting to me at this spot. I don't think we pull the trigger on him right now, though. Eddie Armenta, speaking of good personalities, the center fielder there certainly stands out with the high leadership and work ethic. Decent on the base paths. He's durable, more than acceptable outfield range, probably more of a corner outfielder when all is said and done with a decent bat. So he's interesting also. Taking a look at the pitching prospects, still loaded up with relievers among the top prospects available. The 2 5-star guys are gone at this point. Ivran Ariza is a starting pitching prospect. Like the work ethic, does have potentially a 5-pitch arsenal. Just don't know if outside of the fastball and the sinker, whether there's going to be anything else that's really high quality enough and developed enough to really make him a true starter. So I think I am leaning towards going with Wiedenhoft and bringing in another shortstop who's not going to be a shortstop at the major league level, but taking another flyer on a high schooler with decent potential. And in the case of Wiedenhoft, I do like the leadership, loyalty, work ethic, and greed. Hopefully a guy who will make the most of his God-given ability in terms of his development. And we've decided we are going to go with Wiedenhoft here. He's looking for a slot, so should be a pretty easy signing when all is said and done. So we're going to draft Wiedenhoft in the third round. Moving on to the fourth, I'll let you know what we decide. It's kind of interesting. Our scout is now recommending a starting pitching prospect, Juan Tercios, here in the fourth round. That changeup doesn't develop. He is a reliever. he's not all that compelling to me for a fourth round pick. It's interesting that Rapaski, who we mentioned in the previous round, is still on the board, but he's moved on from him. But I think I am going to go with the New York metro area prospect. Like the work ethic, and do think with the potential for 65 contact, 65 home run power, is a corner outfielder, DH first baseman. Not the worst prospect in the world to bring on that left-handed bat here in the fourth round of the draft. So we'll bring Rapaski on board. Moving on to the fifth, scouting director recommends we go with the high school reliever Eric Jasso. Like the personality. Looks like he could be a potentially interesting arm out of the bullpen. It is kind of getting to the time where maybe we make a run at a reliever here in the fifth round. So we'll spend some time thinking about that. And I do actually agree with the scout here. I think Eric Jasso is the best pitcher available and the best player available, like the high work ethic and intelligence, like the durability. His fastball and his sinker aren't that far off major league level at this point, and he's only 18 years old. I think there's a pretty good chance he'll develop into a more than respectable relief pitcher, which for the fifth round is not a horrible time to be taking somebody like that. So we're going to go ahead and meet his bonus demand and bring Jasso on board in the fifth. If I do anything interesting the rest of the way these last 15 rounds of the draft, I'll let you know. And we've completed our picks in the draft. No one particularly interesting and of note in the later rounds. You can see a couple players looking for a little more money than slot. Starting pitcher Devin Harrison, who's really going to be a reliever unless that changeup develops. And catcher Phil Lancaster, an 11th round pick with a good personality, but not really a big time prospect. So we've got the money to try to bring them into the system also. But Ostendorf, Edwards, Wiedenhoft, Brad Rapaski, and Eric Jasso are our top 5 picks in the 2027 draft, and they're all 18-year-old high school players. So probably a lot of high ceilings, but a lot of low floors, and we'll see if maybe a couple of those guys can develop as hoped over the coming 3, 4, 5, 6 years. And with the draft in the books and the recent call-up of 2 of our top 4 prospects, Deshaun Seifu and Vance Honeycutt, time to see if those youngsters can help jumpstart this moribund Buffalo Wings offense. And I guess things have gone a little bit better here in the first week with 2 top prospects on the team. We took 2 out of 3 at home against the A's, 2 out of 3 at home against Seattle. We're going on the road at Kansas City to finish off the month, and we're also heading right towards the midway point of the season. So obviously going to be an extremely small sample size with the 2 new additions, but Vance Honeycutt has been awesome, hitting 400 with a homer, a double, and 7 ribbies in his first 25 major league at-bats. So he's certainly helped spark the offense a bit. Deshaun Seifu also doing well, 318 and 22 at-bats with a double and a triple, scored 7 runs, and he's stolen 4 bases. So obviously an extremely small sample size, but we needed to do something to hopefully spark this offense, and hopefully the additions of Seifu and Honeycutt at the major league level will help us do that. And of course, immediately after I'm talking how pleased I am with the additions of Honeycutt and Seifu, Honeycutt tweaked his knee, hyperextended knee, going to have a impact on him. He did get a hit in his only at bat against Kansas City before he got hurt, but gonna be less likely that we'll have him in the lineup over the next week. In fact, quite honestly, I'm not gonna mess around with him. Don't want it to turn into something more serious, so we're just gonna bench him for the week. Not put him on the IL though. Hopefully he can heal up a little quicker than expected. And we did end up bouncing back from that loss to the first game on the road in Kansas City to take the next two games. So close out the month of June playing our best baseball of the year. We've won 4 consecutive series, 2 out of 3. So we haven't swept any of them, but for a team that's been playing pretty mediocre baseball all season, good to be on a little bit of a hot stretch with a 8-4 record over our last 12 games. And taking a look at our team statistics, still underperforming our Pythagorean expectations by 3 games. We're 500 at home, brutal on the road, but with that strong finish to the month of June, we did finally have a winning record for a month for the first time this year. You can see the offense, despite those new additions, still last or close to last in just about every category. Tied for 9th, so middle of the pack in terms of runs allowed. Starter ERA 9th, bullpen ERA 7th, overall ERA right in the middle of the pack. Our defensive efficiency and our zone rating have both been really bad. We are 4th in the National League in strikeouts pitching-wise, but the defense has been a bit disappointing, and I feel like we should be decent, particularly up the middle. Christian Vasquez, our catcher, is a well above average defensive player. We've kind of been mixing and matching in the infield, particularly now, but Tommy Edman is playing some short and second base for us still. Deshaun Seifu playing a little bit of second base with that 65 rating, and Kevin Made playing short also. So I don't say we're exceptional at second base and short, but I think we're certainly competent. And then Miguel Bleas in center field, his 65 range and a 70 error rating. Obviously would love better defense everywhere, but I don't think we're as bad as it looks, and it's not like our corner guys are horrible. Jace Barofin is 60s across the board in right field. Eric Pena in left has got 60 range. Johnny DeLuca, who also plays out there, his 65 range. Third base, Seifu plays there some. Westberg is not great, but he's not a total disaster. And then first base now, when he's back healthy in 3 days, Honeycutt, 6'3". I think he's a more than competent first baseman. Nakajima, the rating's a little lower, and he's only 6'1", but he's quite honestly moved into more of a DH role now with Honeycutt on the team. Does have the 12 homers and 270 at bats, but still easily on the interstate with that .78 average and a negative WAR on the year. So he has definitely been a disappointment given the amount of money that we're paying him. And after we were feeling good, after winning 4 consecutive series, we got swept on the road in Washington, lost 4 in a row there. So that ruins the good feelings of being 8-4 over our last 12, because now we are 8-8 over our last 16, right at 500, 7th place once again. Taking a look at the standings, 22 out. Only positive thing we can say with those 4 straight losses is that we're still 3.5 up on the Phillies, but not the way we wanted to get the month of July started. We'll probably sim ahead this last week till we get to the All-Star break. We've got 3 at home against Atlanta and 3 at home against the Mets. So an opportunity to face the 2 best teams in the division who are tied for first, and maybe have a small impact on how that race ultimately finishes up in the NL East. And the good feelings from the month of June are certainly gone, swept at home by both the Braves and the Mets as we head into the All Star break. So 10 consecutive losses for the Buffalo Wings as we get ready for the Midsummer Classic. Clearly, that is going to leave a mark in the standings. We are 28 games out now with the 10 straight losses that I mentioned. Did not take long for the good feelings of the additions of the minor leaguers and a little bit of a good stretch there to fade away completely. So we're heading into the All-Star break 33-56, 28 games out in the East. That 371 winning percentage is better than only the Phillies in our division, the Giants in the NL West, and the Blue Jays in the AL East. So we are the fourth worst team in baseball. And of course, our expansion counterpart, the Stars, are only 2 games behind in the competitive AL East at 49-40. Taking a look at the league leaders, Shane Bieber, a somewhat controversial acquisition when we brought him on board, is definitely doing the job for us as a 5-inning pitcher, almost exactly a 5-inning pitcher, just a third of an inning away from doing that with 94 2/3 innings in his 19 starts. 6-3 record, ERA of 2, WHIP of 114, 391 Sierra, a little high, 2.2 WAR. But he is the one guy on our team who you can say has certainly lived up to expectations this season. Taking a quick look at the rest of our rotation, Ohtani at 5-8 with a 4.50 ERA. Have to consider that disappointing. Painter at 3-10, 5.09 ERA. Borderline disaster. Sean Sullivan, who was so solid as a rookie last year, 4-10 with a 5.74 ERA. The only positives right now are Bieber, who we've talked about, and then Brandon Williamson, who we moved into the bullpen when Tylor Megill was a disaster over his first 6 starts, and Williamson certainly seems to be holding his own as a 5th starter for us. Moving on, we'll take a quick look at the guys that we brought up. Vance Honeycutt obviously missed some time. Still hitting 300 with 3 homers in his first 50 major league at-bats. So he's definitely slowed down over the last couple of weeks, not surprisingly. But if he continues to perform overall at the level that he has started off his career at, he's going to be a pretty valuable player for us. Deshaun Seifu has not cooled off, which is nice, hitting 325 over 77 at-bats, 5 doubles, 3 triples, so we're getting the extra base hits out of him, despite the fact that he only has the 1 home run. Not expecting a lot of home run power out of him, and he's 10 for 12 trying to steal bases for us, so he seems to be more than holding his own at the major league level with a 138 OPS plus, 141 WRC plus. Now his BABIP is 400. I think it's fair to assume that that will be coming down and that will impact his batting average going forward. But right now there's certainly nothing that suggests we are making a mistake by letting him hopefully continue his last bits of development here at the major league level rather than at AAA. And I think Seifu's performance really puts our offense in perspective because with that 0.8 WAR over his first 18 games, he's tied for the team lead this season with Jordan Westburg, our third baseman, Christian Vasquez, the catcher, and he's already ahead of right fielder Jace Barofin and infielder Tommy Edman, as well as outfielder Eric Pena. So the offense has not been good. Hopefully we can turn things around in the second half. We have, in addition to having Vasquez and Edman on the trade block, we also have actually added Romash Tasuku Nakajima to the trade block. Don't know who's really going to want to be potentially spending $11 million on him next year. But if someone's willing to take a flyer on him. When we brought him on board, we thought his contact and his gap power could both get to 50. We don't think that's the case anymore. He does walk a lot, but when you're hitting buck 73, even all those walks, 53 in 88 games, only get your on base percentage up to 317, OPS of 657. With that home run power and that eye, would hope that he's more productive over the second half of the year. But if we get any type of decent offer for him over the next 2.5, 3 weeks, we'll certainly consider potentially moving on. And we're going to be a lot more active trying to work the trade market proactively rather than just relying on hopefully getting an offer on the guys that we put on the trade block in our next episode. Going to see if we can turn things around post the All-Star break. Can't be any worse than we have been with 10 losses in a row. And then also see if maybe we can extract a little value from some veterans that are unlikely to be back on our team next season. Last thing we'll check in on is the All-Star Game rosters, see who we have, who is an All-Star this year. Shane Bieber, not surprising with that league-leading ERA, is on the team. Shohei Ohtani, probably a bit of reputation, but good to see him on the team as well. And then the reliever, Mike Baumann, 1-1, 268 ERA over 57 innings pitched, also on the team. Cannot say that it is a big surprise to see that there are no Buffalo position players who made the All-Star team this year, given our very poor offense. But Bieber, Ohtani, and Baumann are your 2027 All-Stars for our Buffalo Wings. And as we get ready to finish up the episode, one other guy that I'm going to put on the trade block is Garrett Crochet. Picked him up in the Rule 5 draft, and he's been an expensive flop, making almost $9 million this year. Has struck out 42 batters in 33 2/3 innings pitched, but he's allowed 43 hits, 18 walks, and 6 homers. So has been below average or below replacement level, more accurately, in terms of his performance. Don't know that anyone's going to be knocking down our door to bring him on board, but clearly the team option that we have for next season, extremely unlikely that we are going to exercise that. So if there is some demand for him, we will certainly be willing to listen to offers. And with that, we are going to call it an episode. I think the draft was productive. I do like the fact that we've now gotten Seifu as well as Honeycutt into the Major League lineup, and we're seeing what those guys can do. As I talked about, they've both been productive. The offense is still a disaster, but those two are doing their job. And we'll find out what we end up doing as the trade deadline approaches in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.